So yes, I am John Fetterman, and I am the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania. I want to thank everybody for coming out. It is a beautiful spring day, and listening to somebody that looks like me might be the last choice of a lot of people. So thank you for coming out, and thank you to Ted Pitt for extending the invitation. I'm running for a statewide office. I'm not going to talk about my campaign at all, but suffice to say that running a statewide race is like 8 months straight of finals week. So there's a lot going on. There's always something to do. There's always something you have to think about. So when I took on the privilege of speaking before you today, I didn't want to do the easy thing and just kind of talk about what I've done before. If you have any interest in Braddock or what I've done, there's TED Talks online, and I didn't want to just kind of take the easy approach and say, well, let me just do another one, just like that with newer updates. So I really started from scratch, and I thought a lot about what the inspiration was today in terms of move and everything, and I built something up, and I'm talking about things that I've really never talked about in public before, using images that I haven't used ever before in a public setting. So kind of like trying a new recipe, it could either be nice or it could be a disaster. So I just hope you bear with me, but I really wanted to just kind of delve down into my persona about what moved me and how I ended up here and how I ended up running in this statewide race that I'm not here to talk about. So without any further ado, before I get started, is everyone familiar vaguely, at least, with Braddock? Braddock is a small mill town outside of Pittsburgh. We're about 15 minutes away. We're down in the Monongahela Valley. And it actually is host to the only functioning steel mill left in the region. I live across the street from it, and Braddock went from an incredibly prosperous community, actually where Andrew Carnegie got his start, to now it's the poorest community in Allegheny County. And it is now the last steel mill, which is really a remarkable thing to say when it would be like going to San Francisco and saying, this is the last software company 100 years from now. So without any further ado, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to stop me in the middle of it. I love that kind of interactive nature of it. And without any further ado, thank you for being here. Does anyone know what that is? Can anyone see the outline? It's Pennsylvania, okay? Does anyone know why it's red and blue? Has anyone heard the adage about Pennsylvania politics before? Yes. What, could somebody tell me from the audience?
Pittsburgh on the one hand, Philadelphia on the other hand,
and Alabama in the middle. And so absolutely right. And by Alabama, I don't really say that on the campaign trail. I talk about the big red T, if you will. And that's where I grew up. I grew up in the middle of Pennsylvania, and I always get to use a laser pointer, like right there. That's York County. That's where I grew up. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was incredibly lucky. I was born into a two-parent, stable family. I was read to at night. I knew what love was. I knew what security felt like. I never had to worry about food, clothing, shelter, any of these things. But I really didn't take it, took it for granted. I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time. Education was a priority in my family, and going to college was a foregone conclusion. And my father, who had achieved some measure of financial success and independence, said, I'll help you to whatever school you get in and go to. So that was me. I ended up going to Albright College. And that's me playing football. The year is I was kind of like a jock, kind of like a dumb jock. I guess the term that we use today is bro. I was kind of like a bro. I grew up in a conservative household. I wouldn't be a Tea Partier, but I, certainly kind of conservative leanings. Never really looked, across the aisle to consider different things about my situation. So that, super bro right there. And this, yes, that is the best, finest specimen of a mullet I think you probably will ever see. This is 1989, and this was a summer in between going back to football camp. And like I said, I just want to emphasize that I didn't really have like a really thoughtful worldview that like many of you probably have, or like many of the college students that I encounter when I'm out campaigning all across the state. So again, I was in this kind of comfortable, conservative York bubble, didn't really consider much about other things than football and all the things that go along with that. And that's me giving my class speech. When I graduated, I was class president and had a nice 4 years. No drama, didn't have to worry about student loans or anything like that. And again, really didn't appreciate just how easy I had it. And again, it wasn't because I was special, it wasn't because I was this exceptional scholarship student, it was because, again, the random lottery of birth put me in this incredibly cushy situation. And I would go on that way for another couple years. And I was like, well, I was a finance major undergraduate, I might as well go get my MBA. So I ended up enrolling in business school and never realized the path that my life was going to take. Fast forward 2 years from that day there, and we're nearly on the 23rd anniversary of that. This is, if you can see back there, this is a car accident. And right there is my best friend's car. It was April 6, 1993. And he was on his way to come pick me up to go to the gym. And he never got there. And I never knew why at first. I was like, that's, he's sleeping in, lazy. I'm going to ride his ass later, really good for that. And then I found out that he was killed in a car accident through no fault of his own. And you can see the horrific violence of that accident. He actually never stood a chance. So that's nearly 23 years ago. It's coming up on that anniversary. And that really kind of froze my world right there. And that really kind of moved me beyond the things that I was considering. It moved me to consider my own mortality. It moved me to consider, John, you could wake up tomorrow morning and not know that you had 20 minutes left to live. You could be just going about your morning routine and not know that you were about to be blasted off this earth and not have any way to stop that. So I began to do a lot of introspection, and I began to think, I need to do something. Something has to come from this. Something good has to come from this tragedy. Something has to come from this tragedy, and this is the finality of that moment for me. Is like, this is my friend's gravesite. I was a pallbearer, and I had never confronted that up close like that. So this was a moment in my life that I was moved to do something positive out of that. So what I decided to do was, I was like, I'm going to join Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Something that I'd never considered doing before, something that I was like, it just made sense. It just felt like the right thing to do. So I did just that. I signed up for Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and this was the family that I was paired up with. This little boy right here, 8 years old, Puerto Rican family, his name is Nick. And Nick buried his father about 4 months earlier in this picture was taken, and his father died from AIDS, wasted away from AIDS. What compounded that even more so was that when I was introduced to Nick, his mother had full-blown AIDS, and she would pass away 4 weeks later after we got hooked up. And that's what really fried my circuits. That's what moved me to completely look at my life and look at what I was doing and look at the path that I was on completely different. I'm not sure where the clicker goes. So I immediately, when I met his mother, I promised her, I said, I would do everything I could to make sure that your son gets to go to college someday. And at that point, I knew that I wasn't going to stay on the path where I was. I wasn't going to work in finance. I wasn't going to go get a job at some kind of investment bank or do anything like that. So I switched my entire life around, and I quit my job. I quit my job, and I ended up moving to Pittsburgh, and I joined AmeriCorps. And I joined AmeriCorps, and I ended up teaching GED classes in the Hill District here in Pittsburgh. And for those of you that might be familiar with the Hill District, you know that it's not an easy neighborhood, and you know that it's a place where disparity lives. But after meeting this young man and realizing that he would be an AIDS orphan before his 9th birthday, I couldn't move down my path in life the way I had planned up until that point. And at that point, I reworked every aspect of my life. Fast forward, this is like Boyhood, if you've ever seen that movie Boyhood, where it chronicles the 12 years in the boy's life. This picture was taken in May of 2009. That's Nick right there. He's a 23-year-old man, and that picture was taken immediately after his graduation from college, Washington and Jefferson, local college out here. And I kept my promise to his mother, even though his mother would only live an extra month before we met. And it was one of the guiding principles of my life, and it put me on a path. You ever see those bumper stickers from rescue dogs where it's like, who rescued who? They put, people put them on their cars. And to me, that's a very similar sentiment, because had I not been confronted with my own mortality through my friend's accident, had I not sought out and met this young man that showed me the true definition of what strength was and resiliency was, I wouldn't have gone on the path that I was, and I would have had a much less rich life, and I would have gone through life much less unexamined life, basically, for lack of a better phrase. And those years between that first picture that I showed you and the second picture were spent working and fighting against inequality. That's how I ended up in Braddock, Pennsylvania. And that's what I've done for the last 15 years in Braddock, is work against inequality, all because I was moved to reconsider my life after my own mortality, and also realizing that things just aren't right in this country. This shouldn't be this way. The random lottery of birth that gave me a cushy life, that gave me 2 graduate degrees and no student loan debt, and the same random lottery that made him an AIDS orphan before his 9th birthday, something has to be done, and I dedicated my life professionally to doing that. And this image right here, that's him as a 30-year-old man. He turns 31 years old this July, and he actually is a case manager. The men in the vests are prisoners that are re-entering society, so he's paying it forward. And I take a great deal of pride in knowing that that's how he's decided to spend his life after he has done so much to help shape my life and shape the decisions that I make and currently make, and the reasons why I'm running in this race today. Again, all started because I was so moved by what happened there. And it finally came full circle. This guy right here, that's my son Carl. And he is the same age that Nikki was when I met him that very first day in New Haven. So 22 years later, the circle is kind of complete now. And I have a son that's the same age as the young boy, the 8-year-old boy that really kind of saved my life back in 1994 that I met. And I'm forever grateful for the way that young man has helped move me to a better understanding and a better way of conducting my life, and realizing how I wanted to spend my professional life, working to help close this gap, working against inequality, working against the disparity that exists in this society. And if somebody would have asked me, John, what were you going to do when you were graduating and when you had your mullet and when you were playing college football, I never would have said, well, I'm going to be mayor of the poorest community in Pennsylvania someday, and I'm going to spend my days working for $150 a month fighting against inequality and disparity. And the only reason I was able to do that, the only reason I got lucky enough to get on this path, was because I was moved by the actions and the lives of a little boy that I met strictly through chance. And that story is even more compounded in a weird, mystical way to me, is that I was mentioned in the introduction, is the only reason I'm the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania is because of one person's vote. I won my first election by one single vote that day. And one of the things I want to leave you with today is that every vote does matter. Every vote does count. And if that person hadn't voted for me, I wouldn't be standing in front of you to this day. I wouldn't be running for the office that I'm running for. And these random things that have moved my life, whether it was the accident that took my friend, whether it was the decision to join Big Brothers, whether it was the random pairing of myself and this little boy, or whether it was that one person that showed up to vote that day and was told that they couldn't vote because they're not on the list, and they knew their right, and they actually did, and that provisional ballot is what catapulted me into my professional career in politics. So it's been a real pleasure to speak before you today. Thank you very much. I thank you for the privilege of sharing what has moved me and has shaped my life to this very day. Thank you very much.